Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. I'm Sascha. This is Michael Rhodes from Australia, our modern mystic. And today we talk about aliens. What a great topic to start the day with. Michael, you have anything to say in regards to the subject?
Yes, spare me from your mad inspirational moments. That's what I have to say. I mean, What do I know about aliens?
So I think a good way to start this would be, what do we mean when we say aliens? I mean, this is from a human perspective. I know you say we are metaphysical, multidimensional, immortal, magnificent beings, eternal and immortal beings of love and light. So from that perspective, are there aliens, or are what we consider aliens also magnificent, multidimensional, etc., etc., etc. beings? Maybe that's a good question to start.
I can't believe we're having this conversation. Okay, another view of aliens. If you're not 100% being who you are and connected with the whole planet, connected with nature, connected with humanity in the oneness that for most people is a complete concept, including science, because they don't experience it, then you could say we are aliens on our own planet. And if you're living subconsciously, then everything around you of the world, of nature, and the universe is conscious and we're subconscious, so we're not connected, then we're aliens to ourselves. We're alienated from each other. We're alienated from our planet. We're alienated from nature. We're actually alienated from humanity in the very depths of the illusion we live in. And so that is a form of alienation. And so we are aliens. Now, do aliens carry metaphysical so many aliens? I've met a lot of aliens, but they were all metaphysical, and they were all, with one exception or two exceptions, a higher, far higher consciousness than me. And so they were living, their living reality was that metaphysical self. They no longer needed a physical body through which to show them the error of the manifestations via illness and so-called accidents.
So going back to my question, we could say, no, there are, from that statement of we are magnificent, multidimensional, etc. beings, there are no aliens, but we are alienated from that state of being. And then as a second part, we could say, from our human, very ignorant and closed perspective, from our alienated perspective, maybe that's a nice way of putting it, there are loads of aliens out there.
There are, when you say out there, you mean out beyond our world?
So, I mean, I would say, just judging from a normal physical human's perspective, from the world that we know through our physical senses, from the world that we know through our eyes, and how we usually in common language refer to aliens, we would conclude that, yes, there are loads of aliens out there, correct?
Out there being space.
Out there being outside of ourselves. And now I get it that we're getting into a difficult statement here as well, but just staying with the normal human perception.
Okay, I would say there are many alien beings, humanoid, but not our human, on this planet, in the guise of looking like human beings. Many.
That is interesting. Okay, so would that be people or humans, beings, let's just use the word beings that use human appearance, but internally or energetically or spiritually, they are of different origin? That's what you want to say?
Basically, yes. I think there would be a surprising number of those here. You see, we don't see what is, we see through a belief system. And not only do we have our own personal belief systems, pretty well everybody, we then have collective belief systems. And so you're looking through your personal belief system, then through the collective, and then through the subconscious. We don't really see what's around us at all. And then everything we see physically has a frequency slower than the speed of light. And there are aliens walking on this planet, other beings walking on this planet, faster than the speed of light. Many of them we don't see anything of unless you travel metaphysically on your own planet and begin to make the connections. Then you see, whoa, we've got a serious lot of other people here, but they're not called human.
Okay, so one, we could establish that based on your metaphysical experience, aliens, as we would refer to them from a normal human perspective, do exist. And would you want to say anything about whether they are benign, whether they are, well, in your experience, is it like humans? Is it very mixed? I think we need to approach it from a very broad perspective at first. So I'd like to establish this. What do you think about it?
From the human normal judgmental viewpoint, I would say 95% are beneficial to us and care about us and are compassionate, but are under the obligation, just as I, as a spiritual teacher, am under the obligation that I do not interfere with a person's consciousness, but I can do everything in my power to inspire it to lift itself for that person. So they're under the obligation. We do not interfere in what humanity has created. And there are many of beings like that on the planet. There are also a few, very few, that are like the greys, like the lower caste of the reptilians, because the higher caste of them is not against us in any way at all, but the lower caste is still caught in with its ancient Kabbalistic memories of control and devaluation of other beings.
Now, before we get into grace and reptilians, I would like to take one step back and say, would you say that in your experience, the humanoid form, saying a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, is the mostly spread form that beings exist in the multiverse that you have seen?
In the multiverse, it's a common form, but there are so many others that work as well and better. And so there's a vast diversity of form. Haven't you been watching Star Trek? You should know this. There's a vast diversity of form, of which the humanoid shape is a fairly common one, in as far as it has it's great, in as far as it goes, that it is the best form to express physicality. Like feline, there are many felines, but there is that humanoid form. There are many, many types that take humanoid form, but as you go further out into the multiverse, wow, there is just so much out there that it doesn't continue. Yeah.
Okay, and now let's try to make it as concrete as possible. Let's go to the first group you mentioned, the Greys. So they are humanoid in form, as far as I understand, correct? They have 2 arms, 2 legs, they have a head. What makes them different to humans?
Very much lower consciousness with a higher technology. So they basically, you could say they feed off energy, and they feed off our negative energy, as do the lower reptilians.
Would you say that Greys are part of humanity in a way?
Say that again?
Would you say that Greys are a part of humanity?
No.
Okay, so they are different. So you'd say it's a different species.
It's a different species, if you like, they're alien.
Okay. And the same thing would be true for reptilians?
Yeah, the same is true for reptilians, although, as I used to talk about long ago, there were early humans and reptilians interbred. the reptilians carried way beyond our level of aggression, of survivalism, a whole lot. And unfortunately, it would have been nice if we had let go of that, but the Nephilim or the Anatai, they, if anything, brought that to the fore. So we became an aggressive species, but aggressive against ourselves. Because the greatest aggression in humanity is against ourselves, not against other people.
Okay. If we dare to compare reptilians, gray, and humans, let's just stick with those three to make it simple for right now. Is there anything that humans can do that they can't, or anything that in the way that humans are set up as spiritual beings that they are not, or has it to do with a different path of evolution that it took?
We have a greater potential than either of them. We have a far greater spiritual potential. They hold it down. Spirituality attempts to raise it. So they work with the cabal very much to hold down the human consciousness through fear. I don't say we're a superior race, because I do not believe in superior and inferior, but certainly our potential is far greater than theirs, and they know it. And they're about to lose that battle anyway.
So would you say that, I'm wondering about evolution, and I'm wondering about the development through the ages. And so given that maybe at one point everything, and we all started more or less equally, then how I imagine it, then
forget we all started more or less equal. That's no, we're all, you could say we all carry, let's just say, to create a term, we all carry the God seed.
Right.
But what we did with that was always down to us in our own evolution of our own consciousness, which is the evolution of the human consciousness. Obviously that works through the whole consciousness. There are the greys and the lower reptilians moved off quite early into a far more satanic influence.
So am I correct if I imagine it to be something like, out of this initial God seed situation, those different streams of consciousness spread out into the universe, if we want to use space metaphors?
To address that, let's say that as the initial God seed began to move into the multiverse, there were influences that appealed to some and were rejected by others. So I can't explain that.
No, I get it. And then because there is free will as the basis of everything, every expression of the God seed, if we want to stick with that term, every stream of expression that spread out from this God seed was then absolutely free as to which path they chose. But those streams were distinct streams right from the start: the human stream, the reptilian stream, the gray stream, and other streams, right?
Do you know, I'm not 100% sure about that, so I won't throw one in.
Would you think that a human could incarnate into a reptilian body or into a gray body?
No, and nor the vice versa.
Okay. And why is that? Is it just the
reptilians interbred, and I don't know about the greys, but the human is a very unique, has an incredible potential, higher than those. And I think genetically, I'm not saying that couldn't be genetically altered, because we've been genetically altered in the past. But for what I feel in this moment, no, they could not breed. They could not breed with us. What was it wasn't breed, you said?
No, I was asking whether you, in your perception, a human could incarnate into a reptilian body or a gray body.
Sorry.
Because I take it.
I don't believe so. However, I will say that if a human took themselves into the negative and to the evil and incarnated on a downward level, which is possible, you can go from the level, the three-dimensional level on, you can lower yourself. And if you kept on lowering yourself, the possibility then exists that you could incarnate into an energy that is exactly as evil and as low in energy as you have taken yourself with your own free will.
Okay. And you were speaking about higher levels of reptilians as well before.
Yes.
And so would that be, if we want to speak in metaphors, if we look at two beautiful flowers, they're beautiful flowers, but they're two different species, just completely different. Would that be a good analogy if you have a spiritually evolved human being and a spiritually evolved reptilian being, and it's just different?
Yes, I tend to call the lower energy reptilian and the higher energy draconian.
Okay.
I tend to call it, and I'm not sure that I'm correct in doing that, but that's what I tend to do. I think I base that on my relationship with dragon and dragon consciousness, but I'm not really, I would not like to say that the dragon consciousness and the reptilian consciousness are anywhere near on a parallel. I think, no, let me keep going. I think dragon consciousness is way, way, way above the reptilian. So we'll call the reptilians higher consciousness and lower consciousness, but it's a bit like us. A higher consciousness person is a very different in their expression from a lower consciousness person. But we can make comparisons, but we should not make judgments.
I know you spoke about it before and you briefly mentioned it in this conversation also, but I would like, for viewers who have not seen you speak about this, I would like to get into our history as a human race and the connection to aliens, with aliens, between us and aliens. What is your perception, your metaphysical experience in regards to human evolution and aliens, and the relation between the two?
There have been many, many failed attempts of the human evolution. You know, with paleontology is littered with them. Homo florensis, Homo neanderthalis, many, many. Homo erectus, there's many. And they weren't all exclusively alone on the planet. Many of those were on the planet at the same time. But in my experience, and I want to emphasize my experience, so I'm not sitting here saying categorically, this is how it is. But in my metaphysical experience, there was a spaceship from the future, us in the future, that came back way back into our very distant past. And probably you could have put all of New York in it. That's how big it was. So for all those people who say it's not possible for anything like that to fly, sorry, but obviously they didn't know that. And they did, and they landed down on a very pristine planet with a very early hominid. We hadn't reached what I would call human. And they were there for a long time. They established, they were purely vegetarian, fruitarian. They lived mostly in the great forests. They built cities, and their idea was there was probably at least 500,000 of them, enough to really start again. And their idea was to influence humanity away from all positive negativity that was held in our future probability pattern.
Did they look just like us?
Did
they look just like us?
More refined, more beautiful, more perfect, more healthy, more intelligent, higher consciousness. But the idea was to blend that into humanity so that we could avoid many of the pitfalls that happened to us. However, that was sabotaged because there was Earth went through one of its periodic shake-ups, which was vastly volcanic. And although they knew this was coming, and they floated many of the cities, and they floated the ship, although they did everything they could to avoid this, it was far more titanic than they expected. And so some of them had gone down to Middle Earth, down into the Earth, and they survived down there. But most of the ones on the planet, all the cities and even the spaceship was completely engulfed in violence, in flame, and in earth, which really went through a very volcanic change, where the poles shifted, and it was pretty heavy duty stuff. And so there were survivors, and the survivors didn't do too well. They had no survival skills. You know, this was something they'd never been through. And this was also in a time almost preceding dinosaurs. And although our stuff says that wasn't possible. And so they were still struggling in the time of dinosaurs. And there were people, early hominids on the planet in that time. And so they crossbred because they could, because historically they'd already done it. And so they crossbred, and the crossbreed was definitely an improvement, and they began to increase in numbers, but it was a serious struggle until this vast space battle took place, and reptilians were being shot down. It was a reptilian versus reptilian. It was an interracial war, and they were shot down, and some of the survivors of that began to breed with this other hybrid. And so this then completely demolished every good intention of the future humans, because that then created us more in the way we were. And now this goes back a long time, way back. And then along comes the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, who then took us and began to genetically alter us again.
Who are they?
And
could you briefly?
They came from the planet Lyra, and they were called Lyrians. But as history looks at them as Nephilim and as the Anunnaki, who were some of them were like gods to us and loved us and tried to raise us, and there are others, the more warlike side of them, who despised us and wanted to enslave us. It seems that that lot had the greatest sway because they were warrior types, and so they did enslave us. They subjected us to a very deep state of subconsciousness, because you've got to consciously break away from enslavement. Subconsciously, as we see today, the compliance.
Just one thing, did they come, why did they come to Earth? Like, so we have this race, so we have those humans from the future that came here, in your experience, they mixed with the people who were on Earth. Then we had those reptilians fighting in the sky, then they came down, then they interbred with those who were on the...
First the future, the people of the future.
Right.
Hominid and the closest human they could find interbreeding, which began to create the human race. Then came the reptilians,
right,
created aggressors. Then came well after that, about 400,000 years ago. This is cycle within cycle. We're in the end of the fifth cycle. And then about 400,000 years ago, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, as they've been called, various names, they were giants, and I've written and spoken of the giants. They were about 8 meters tall, two sides of them, the caring, spiritual focus side, but completely dominated by the aggressive warlike side.
Any idea
And
why they came? Any idea why they came?
I don't know at this stage. Simply, I don't think they had any good intentions. One part did, but the dominant part didn't. And so they bred as well, and there were giants who were lesser beings enslaved. Enslavement became the predominant thing, and humans who were looked on as little more than vermin running around at their feet, they did the genetic changes, and we were created. Sorry if this goes right against Christianity, but we were created in an image of enslavement and subservience, which is still with us to this day. But we were growing away from us. We win this present battle, and those who raise their consciousness will finally leave enslavement in a golden age. We will leave that right behind us and move on to other dimensions. However, the ones who remain enslaved and compliant by their own free will, if there is such a thing for them, if they remain subconscious, they will continue the next cycle with a slightly higher frequency, but the same program. They will continue because they're resisting change. And that doesn't make them bad or wrong. My heart goes out to them because they're more deeply programmed than people like me. This is why left brain is so dominant, because it holds on to fear, anger, rage, revenge, instead of love, compassion, trust, and etc.
I think we are nearing the 30 minutes mark for today. I think there is more to this topic to talk about. So I think we might do a second session about it. But for today, I thank you very much. And I enjoyed our conversation. And
thank you, Sascha. I enjoyed our conversation. You are, I just leave it at that. You are.
And you are.
You are, you impress me.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.